Right, it's been a pretty hectic day, particularly with those developments at the G7 summit. We can confirm now President Trump has left Canada, with his Secretary of State Marco Rubio also leaving the summit shortly afterwards. Let's get across all of those international stories too, but some local ones as well. Joining me now to do that, National Affairs Editor at the Daily Telegraph, of course Sky News host, the wonderful James Morrow, and our political reporter there, Cam Redden. Well, gents, welcome. James, you've written today that the snub from Trump actually might be a bit of a get-out-of-jail card for the PM. I don't disagree. I think I made that point just a minute ago. I mean, Albanese's clearly got under Trump's skin, and we've seen before that rarely ends well, but we should have had, and I've said this from the outset, a proper Washington meeting in place here, not something around the sidelines of the G7, and not something that obviously that has been junked as it has. I think the fact that it's junked and not been replaced is telling.
Well, yeah, absolutely. I mean, the fact is that this meeting was a very small meeting to start with. It was a stand-up sidebar meeting somewhere on the edges of this summit. So that just already shows with how little, on the radar Australia is for Donald Trump at the moment. But, it didn't have to be that way. It did not have to be that way. Donald Trump, as you know, loves to receive foreign visitors. From the moment he was elected, people were flying to Washington or inviting him to come and see them and doing things with him. It's called diplomacy. Kevin Rudd, of course, should have been more on this. Get that meeting. Say, hey, come on up to Washington. Do the Oval Office thing, the press conference. Albo could have given Trump a Rabbitohs scarf. Could have done all sorts of things. But, instead we get this Albanese that I don't think really, and I write this in tomorrow's Daily Telegraph, I don't think he gets foreign policy, and I don't think he gets what's going on. There's this titanic struggle between countries like Iran and Russia and China and countries on the other side, like, the United States and Australia, whom we are supposed to be closely allied with. And I don't think he gets that because he's constantly both sidesing this issue. Oh, we need restraint. Oh, we need to calm down. Both sides need to step back a moment, But that's not going to cut it now. It's not going to cut it in the world that we're in. Choices have to be made. Declarations have to be made. And I think Albanese sees this all through the lens of domestic politics, and I think that means that he just does not have any ground on which to do what Joe Hockey said, which is to go to Donald Trump and say, hey, how can we help? Let's work this out together. Keir Starmer's done it. Why can't Albanese?
I think the problem here, Cam, and you were on the trail in the campaign, I mean, Albanese and Labor more broadly used Donald Trump as a bit of a stalking horse for Peter Dutton. And it's like they don't think we've got a US embassy in Australia that reads the media play and sends back its cables to the White House. I mean, the president would have been briefed on the Australian political campaign and how much he figured in it in many days, in many instances, as a figure of scorn. And then, of course, you've got all the historic references, I played them before, from the Prime Minister and Kevin Rudd about Donald Trump when he was on the outer. Well, now he's not on the outer, he's back in the Oval Office. They want to be friends. And he's sort of just saying, well, when it suits me, I think.
It's a kick in the guts, Peter, there's no doubt about that. And particularly the way that it played out in the space of about 20 minutes, where the Prime Minister's press conference concluded, where he's talking up really with a big smile after Keir Starmer was there talking up AUKUS, feeling like he's probably had a bit of a win there. It was going to walk into the meeting with Donald Trump, shake hands, get the big photo, kill off that criticism from the coalition to say that he couldn't get a meeting. And within about 15 minutes of that meeting concluded, out goes the tweet, Australia never gets told, and suddenly the meeting is off. Now, there is a feeling that that is just the way that this Trump organisation, this Trump administration operates, that they're not the type to pick up the phone and say, sorry, Prime Minister, we can't make that meeting. That's just the way, is the belief that the Trump administration operates. But there's no doubt, Peter, that this is a real blow. There was a hope that he'd be able to come back, meeting secured, criticism allayed, and at the very least they now have a rapport from that meeting. There's no suggestion now, as you outlined, that it's been rescheduled. There is no suggestion that it will happen at any point in the months ahead. There's been some talk around September and the fact that the Prime Minister could be going to the United Nations, maybe deliver an address at the General Assembly in New York, and that could be the next opportunity. But what's going to happen between now and then, Peter? There's so much that you'd have to feel for the Prime Minister, whether they tried their heart out on this, even so, that it'd have to go down as a missed opportunity.
Absolutely, but I also think he's played it pretty poorly since the president was elected in November. I think that's the problem. You can make time to go to the Pope, but you can't go all the way to Washington or have another meeting with Donald Trump at another event before then, given the call and the tariffs and all the other issues, not to say also the global insecurity we're facing. And to look like we've snubbed James Morrow, those comments that we saw only just recently at the Shangri-La dialogue about Australia pulling our weight in defence funding terms.
Yeah, and I mean, you know, you saw Richard Marles yesterday at the Defending Australia Summit, Peter, trying to justify our anemic defence spend and say, well, we need to know what we're going to spend it on first. But, you know, that's the sort of thing that's just not going to cut it. And there's a million other issues, too, that the Trump administration could also have with Australia right now. That includes the recent cancellation of those Israeli visas, you know, from those cabinet ministers. It's the whole free speech situation. And it's this whole thing that Anthony Albanese does. He did it at the press club the other day when he talks about, you know, we're not importing these conflicts from overseas and with an eye towards America, saying, you know, America is the problem, when he won't seem to say that China is the problem. And I think, you know, Anthony Albanese talks about Australian values, but I think we need a bit more of a sense of what those values and whose values are and aren't.